What is going on, and welcome back to the Drum Shed. So we are going to be, this is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and say, this is going to be different. We've had a couple of videos. We've had a couple of videos that were different here lately. But they're things that I answer questions to all the time. And so I feel like they should be addressed in here. And they have to do with drumming, but they have to do with life in general. Okay, so, this thing that we do, playing music, it's drumming, but let's be honest with each other. It's playing music. And playing music is in itself a creative art form, right? And if you've ever met artists, or if you've ever hung out with artists, or hung out in the art department of a college, or you will meet some of the most deprecating, self-loathing people that you ever met. And they are some of the hardest workers. Because the thing that drives them is that it's not there yet. There's something missing. There's something not right. There's something that I haven't gotten yet. And that is the same thing that drives you to practice. But what happens whenever that becomes way too much, where that's all we're hearing? We're just hearing that little voice in the back of our head beat us up and tell us, how awful our playing is. That's a good thing in one respect, because in one respect it pushes us to the next level. But once that gets to be all that we focus on in any area of life, it's gonna just take you down. Okay, so we're gonna talk about some simple things that you deal with, that I deal with, in just the mental aspect of doing this thing called drumming. I find that if I can win mentally before I go into a practice session, that's going to be a good practice session. But if I lose it mentally, if at any point I lose my practice session in my mind, I might as well hang it up and call it quits, because it's very hard for me to get it back. Now, that's just me. But it comes down to you as a person. What are you as a person going to do? What are the decisions you're going to make, and how are you going to approach your drumming? Now, the first thing we need to understand is that our minds are naturally drawn to the negative. Okay, that's just a natural thing. Psychologists have done studies. The mind naturally goes to the more negative thought is going to take prevalence over the positive thought. So you can do 1,000,001 things right on the drum kit, and it's that one thing that you sucked at. It's that one spot where you drop the beat. It's that one. Now, we're talking about a 4-hour gig. This was literally me. I would play a 4 or 5 hour gig in New Orleans, and I would come home and I would sit there and I would drink my Diet Coke and eat a Twinkie and sit there in self-loathing because on the 4th song in the bridge, I missed a backbeat. Like, literally, I would put myself through just the worst kind of anguish over this thing that it just happened. It happened and it's gone. All right? So we need to understand, first of all, how our minds are wired. Our minds are wired to focus on that negative stuff. Now, that's a good thing, like I mentioned before, because it pushes you to be better. Same thing with work. Your mistakes push you to be better. But when we let that negative thought start to take hold and we let it carry over to the next day, instead of going, man, I messed that up, I'm not going to mess that up again. Instead, you go into your practice session going, geez, man, I messed that up. I'll probably mess this up. I'm going to do this exercise, but it doesn't matter because I couldn't even play a backbeat yesterday. If I can't even play a backbeat, how am I supposed to play this? That's how, you're laughing because it's true. Like, that's how we literally do this. What's going on, Kyle? What's up, Mook, Nick? For all of you just joining us, this is literally, I feel so much like a self-help coach right now, motivational coach. But that's what this is about. It's about dealing with the mental aspect of drumming. So we need to understand that our minds are drawn to the negative aspects of things. Okay? Now, before we go into the practice session, we need to make sure that we are cultivating a positive thought process in our day-to-day life. That's going to help us whenever we get into the practice session. So if I'm sitting there thinking negative about everything, man, I can't believe that guy cut me off a track. Are you serious? They left the onions on the hamburger. I specifically told them no onions. Yeah, man, I got another bad report at school. We just let that compile, and we concentrate on those things. I tell you, when you go to the practice room, that's going to be directly what you focus on in the practice room. So it helps if we can start to cultivate just this overall positive vibe, man. Be a hippie. Be positive. Peace, love, man. You really have to develop that in your life so that you can handle a lot of things. Let's take, for me, for instance, that's the only one I can speak from because I live my life every day. I'm a musician, have been for years. On top of that, I run my own business. So I run a business that literally there's only a couple people in the world that do this, that do it successfully full time. Let's put it in that area. So it's a very niche market. And I get up every day, I go, okay, we got to win at this thing. So as an entrepreneur, I have to keep myself motivated. And then in the middle of that day, I have to put all of that down and go, oh, okay, now it's time to practice. Now I need to focus on the creative part. Don't worry about all that stuff. Now it's time to be creative. So you have to learn how to set yourself outside of what's happening and cultivate really a positive atmosphere altogether. Now, things that affect our mind and our thinking that we don't oftentimes think about, okay? Sometimes it's as simple as you are hungry. And that sounds so stupid, but I'm telling you, if your blood sugar drops, your mental ability drops as well. Your ability to carry out certain tasks. With that, drops your ability to deal with negative thoughts. So we need to make sure we're eating well. We need to make sure exercise. I tell you, I start every day with exercise. If I don't start at Mondays, sometimes I have to go in the afternoons. But I prefer to start my day with exercise because it clears the brain. Even if you're not looking to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's totally cool. You don't have to be a bodybuilder. You don't have to be freaking Hans and Franz. If anybody watches Saturday Night Live, I'm just saying. You don't have to be those guys. You can just be somebody that gets out and takes a walk every day. That exercise is going to help release all kinds of positive things in your body without going too deep into what that does. Sleeping, eating, and exercising. Those are three things that will help your just positive mental state whenever you're going about trying to cultivate a more positive atmosphere just throughout your day. The other thing that I wanted to mention was we need to cultivate the ability to see a problem almost like from a bird's eye view. We need to be able to look at our problem from the outside. So a lot of times I get so tied up to my problems that I have a hard time really sushing out what the actual issue is. I'm so concerned with the problem and I'm all ingrained in that problem that I can't step back from it and go, okay, what's really the issue here? Because, you know, I work daily as a drummer. I'm not a bad drummer. Obviously there's a problem here, but what's the problem? So if we can begin to, and this works with anything in life, if we can begin to, you guys are talking on the chat board, you're cracking me up. If we can begin to step outside of our problems and our issues and begin to pick them apart and understand why we're feeling a certain way about something. So if you're working on your paradiddle, okay, and you just can't get it, you can't get past a certain BPM. That lack of being able to play that paradiddle at a certain BPM does not mean you're a bad drummer. It means there's a problem with that one area, okay? So you need to be able to look and go, okay, I'm going to float above this problem and go paradiddle. What does it involve? It involves singles and doubles. Well, am I having problems with my singles or am I having problems with my doubles? Okay, I don't think it's the problem with the singles. I have singles, okay, and that part of the exercise seems easy. But whenever we get to the doubles, there seems to be, I feel like I tighten up at that point. Okay, now we're looking at this problem from way up here and we're going, okay, so are doubles the issue? Then we even go closer and go, okay, so what about that double is the problem? Is it the downstroke or is it a rebound stroke that I'm having trouble with? Is my first stroke louder? Is my second stroke louder? Then we hone in on that whole problem that ruined your day. Guess what? It was a problem with your second double. Doesn't sound so great on your double strokes. So guess what's the first thing I would practice the next day when I came in? Yeah, that's right. The second note of all my doubles until it got better. Because these are good things. These let you know what your problems are. They let you know what your issues are. I'm going to tell you a little story. It's story time with Stephen. I'm going to tell you a little story. Jerry, what's up, man? If you're new to the lessons, I'm just going to say this is not a normal lesson. Jerry said what he's learned from this lesson is buy stock in Twinkies. Yeah, you literally, I was, growing up, I was a fat kid with a mullet, and so I ate a lot of Twinkies. So if anybody was going to buy stock in Twinkies when I was a kid, I totally would have bought stock in Twinkies. when I was in college, you have to graduate with a degree in music, you have to give a senior recital. So it's a big freaking deal. Like you work for a whole semester. Sometimes you work for a year. I worked almost a year on the material for my recital because my material wasn't just songs. I had concepts that I wanted to incorporate into those songs, and I had to write and compose some of the parts and horn parts and all that junk that they make you do in college. So I was freaked out about it. I've been preparing for 2 semesters now. I've been getting ready for it. I feel like I'm ready for it. And it comes down to the week before the recital. And it's time for me to change my drum heads. I was going to change them a few days before the recital, and that way have time to break them in. And then by the time the recital came around, I was a jazz studies major, so tone was very important for me. So by then they would be broken in. I'd be able to tune them just perfectly and get the perfect tone for my senior recital, right? I put this freaking drum head on my drum, and I literally, it sounded like you were beating a dog. It was the worst thing I'd ever heard in my life. And so I'm like, okay, so I'll retune it. So I retune it. Doesn't work. I go the whole day. I cannot get the drum to sound right. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take this. So I take it to some friends at school. I'm like, the grad assistants, because they know more than you. I'm like, can you help me tune this drum, because I'm having trouble with this. It's the same drum head always. So he's tuning it, and man, he's sitting over in the corner as I'm hitting it, and he's just making this face like this. He's so disgusted at me. It's disgusting what I'm doing right there, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, So I leave there, and this is what I took away from it. I can't even tune my snare drum, and I'm supposed to play a senior recital on these yeah, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. I literally, a whole week, it started affecting my eating. I was getting nauseated and sick. This is embarrassing to even tell you. I couldn't even eat Twinkies. Like I was distraught, man. It was like my best girl had just, broke. Best girl, what is that, 1920s? Then my girlfriend had just broke up with me, or, went out with my best friend, or I don't know, my dog died, or because he must have died because my snare was sounding like a dead dog. Come to find out, I finally am like, you know what? Maybe it's the drum head. Why I wouldn't troubleshoot that from the beginning. Kind of like the IT guy. Have you turned it off and turned it back on? Yeah, so that's what happened. I took the drum head off and put another one on there. It sounded just like my snare. It always sounded. It sounded gorgeous. The head was warped. The store had sold me a warped drum head. Only one I've ever gotten in my life. The only one I've ever gotten in my life. I could roll it across the floor, and it's got this sideways like it's drunk, That was my issue. So I put myself through a week of self-loathing that I couldn't tune a drum because, why? The head was warped. There's nothing I could do about it, right? So what I took away from that was I learned how to begin to float above my problems, because if I would have not gotten so emotionally involved in my tuning of my snare drum, I could have figured out it's just the head, it's warped. Like that would have been number 2 thing I should have done, is go, okay, is this the head? Because this doesn't sound like anything I've ever put on my snare drum. And it's at the time I used Reno coated ambassadors. I had been using them since since I started playing the drums. And so I knew it didn't sound correct, but I lost my ability to kind of rise above the problem and go, so what's really the issue here? Could we troubleshoot this? I literally felt awful about myself, about my playing, everything. Another story, I feel like my dad sometimes. My dad was a pastor, and he told stories constantly. He was the consummate storyteller. I wish I could tell them like he could tell them. I hope I'm not losing your attention, but I'm trying to point out that I am a person that does this for a living, day in, day out. I'm a guy that runs my own business day in, day out. I play on a professional level here in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, and I still, every day, deal with my playing's not good enough. I still deal with that thought every day. So you are not alone. A couple weeks ago, I hired a guy for a gig. I knew I shouldn't have hired him for it. I'd hired him before. I didn't care for what he had done on the gig. Sure enough, we get in there, and his attitude sucked, man. He was a fine player, fine singer, but his attitude just stunk. Like, it stunk like rotten, week-old garbage that's been sitting down. It stunk, man. I can't stand to be around a person whose attitude stinks, especially on a gig where we're supposed to actually be having fun and like what we do. And so I let that bad gig with him. I left there on Thursday. I didn't touch my drums until Tuesday of the next week. Why? I felt bad about my playing. Now, I do this full time, and I still couldn't rise above and go, hey, you know what? That's just that guy. It has nothing to do with you. Your playing sounded worse because that guy's attitude was awful. And as the night progressed, my attitude started getting worse. And anytime your attitude starts getting worse, guess what? It's downhill from there, man. It's downhill. So don't let outside influences affect the way you view things. The other thing that I've learned in life is I can a lot of times go and see another drummer play, and instead of inspiring me, I leave feeling really bad about myself. Now that's probably just an anomaly that only happens to me. I know you guys are perfect, and it never happens to you. Something that I learned years ago that will help you so much. Just write this down if you write anything else down that I ever say. Don't ever compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. Okay? So if Benny Greb is sitting up there playing, you are seeing his outside. You are seeing the manifestation of what he has struggled with over the years. It is actually taking place on the drums, his mastery. That's the end result of his fight and his struggle with his negativity and his self-loathing and his hardships. That's his outside. So you take yourself, who maybe you live in, let's take Mookers for instance. Maybe you live in Australia. Maybe you live way away from where Benny Greb is. Completely different set of environments, completely different social environment while you're growing up, completely different music that you listen to. Your playing should sound nothing like his. And yet you leave because what did you do? You compared your insides, you compared yourself to what his outsides were, the result of what all of his work had been. And you're sitting there looking on the inside going, I doubt myself. I'm not good. I did this the other day. It was bad. I dropped the drumstick. Who drops drumsticks? Not Benny Greb. Benny Greb never drops drumsticks. His fingers are made of glue. You know what I'm saying? These types of things go through our head. Sounds ridiculous, but it's literally what goes on in our head. Okay? So if you can just remember that, never compare your insides to someone else's outside, man. It just never works. It never works out in your favor. The other thing we can do is remember that our playing is not the sum of one practice session or one gig. So when you leave a practice session, and I used to do this all the time. In college, it was not as much so because in college, this helped me in college. They had timesheets. I need to start doing this just at my studio. When I get to the studio, I need to start writing times. On the doors, people used to get mad at me. They'd talk to the professor. So Steven's taking up all the times, because as soon as they would put those timesheets up, like literally, I would get up at 5 in the morning and be down at that school so I could be the first one to sign up for my times, because they have practice rooms there. And so if you're at school, I didn't have time to drive 20 minutes home. I'd lose 20 minutes of practice there, 20 minutes of practice back. So you got an hour down the tube. I'd rather just practice at school. So I'd go to the vibe room, I'd go to the marimba room, I would go to the drum set room. I'd be blocking off the times that I did not have class. I got an hour and a half, I'm coming to practice, I got this, I got that. And I would be sure to get there and just simply prioritize my practice times. I had like 6 or 7 hours a day in college, majority of the time that I was practicing. And so that's what I would do. It wasn't as hard then. Now I'll leave a practice session and I'll feel awful. And then I'll think I'm an awful drummer. Like, how does that happen? How does, boy, that wasn't a great practice session, lead to, boy, I suck? Right? There's no correlation between the two. It was simply a bad frame of 2 hours. Just leave it behind. So you are absolutely not the sum of a bad practice session, a bad gig. Somebody taught me this years ago as a piano player. I used to play stage shows with him, and we went and played. He used to compose for the Mississippi Symphony Orchestra, the Mobile Symphony Orchestra. He's such a talented guy, like a second father to me. And he had this analogy, and it goes for everything. But he would say, when we're in the middle of a gig, he said, the music is like a plane. He said, and all of a sudden, you're flying over this forest, you're cruising, awesome, and all of a sudden, you've got a problem, and you're in the trees, and you're like skidding the trees, and he's yelling, pull up, because we got to fix the problem immediately, okay? Music is not a stagnant art form. Music is moving. It's much more like a river than it is like a mountain. It is always moving. Okay? So what we have to do is what his whole purpose was you have to pull up, you have to fix it right then. It doesn't matter what you do, you have to fix the music right then. Because if you don't fix it, you're just going to crash the whole plane. Okay? That goes the same goes for everything that you're doing within music. Life passes. If you have a good gig, guess what? That was yesterday. Today we got to deal with today. If you had a bad gig, guess what? That was yesterday. Let's deal with today. Okay? The thing I used to do that would help me, because I was really hard on myself. I would beat myself up. So I started making a list of things I didn't do good at the gig. Instead of going, oh man, that was awesome, dude. You were awesome. Because that leads to me going, hey, I'm going to go eat some more Twinkies. We're eating a lot of Twinkies in this lesson. You guys are cracking me up. They're comparing rivers of Twinkies versus mountains of Twinkies. I think I'd rather the river because molten Twinkies seems attractive to me. That's just the fat kid in me talking, like the fat kid with the mullet. That's me talking, you know. I think I would rather have, and I think when it would come to creating man boobies, getting so fat that we have, I think that would feed that better, you know, the liquid being able to drink it. I'm brainstorming out loud here. This lesson has quickly gone downhill. I used to make a list after every gig, and it would be things that I didn't do well. And what that allowed me to do was it allowed me to float above the gig instead of getting so ingrained in, oh, you're such a horrible person because on that third song you were supposed to play a songo, and guess what? You didn't play a songo. You didn't play a songo. You started a soca because you got it confused. Like, it allowed me to go above that and go, okay, what was the issue there? I didn't know the tunes. That was the issue. So point one would be you should learn the freaking tunes before you get to the gig. And it takes all the emotion out of it. Putting it down on paper took all of the emotion out on it. Then it was just a bullet point of me going, yeah, man, I didn't know that song. I absolutely didn't spend enough time on that song. I can play a soca, I can play a songo, but I couldn't remember that song. So it wasn't a problem with my drumming on either end. It was a problem with me not putting the work in before the gig. Doing that, making bullet lists, will help you to float above those problems and not be so hard on yourself. Being hard on yourself is a good thing, but we are our own worst enemies sometimes. The other thing I was going to say is go slowly. I've harped on this so much, especially this past year. There's nothing that will derail a practice session for me quicker than going in and trying to play something that I cannot play at a tempo that is absolutely unreasonable for me to even be attempting playing that at. And I have been playing the drums since I was 14, 15, and since I was a fat kid. And why has that been such a topic tonight in my mind? Maybe I got daddy issues from being a fat kid. I still, to this day, have that problem. I still go in and go, nah, dude, I can play to that tempo. Even though the day before I was playing at 30 BPMs lower than that, and today I'm not even warmed up. And I think I can just come in and be like, yeah, I got this at 130 BPM, no problem. No matter, yesterday I was playing at 95 BPM and barely getting by. I got this today. I'm a new man. That's positive thinking, right? That's thinking. I've never had that turn out good for me, and that'll derail my practice sessions very quickly. I do a lot better if I come in and I do a warm-up of something that I know. And we think it's wasted time, but it's not wasted time. It's time that we're getting our body acclimated to the new environment that we're putting it in. We're getting our mind ready to work. And the next thing I'm going to do is whenever I get to something I'm working on, I'm going to go slower than I did the day before at it because I'm going to warm up into it. Then, after about 5 minutes, I'm going to kick that tempo up a little bit after I'm sure that I'm confident I can do it, because what I'm doing is I'm building my confidence. I'm like a baby, man. It's baby steps. I'm building my confidence the whole entire way. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and shoot those in. That's what I have to do for myself, is sit there and build myself up, and then I get back to, if I had it at 110 BPM the day before, I get back to 110 BPM and I'm burning it, and I'm like, yeah, I knew I had this, and it took me 15 minutes to get there, but what I did was I saved myself the self-loathing that would happen if I started way faster than I knew I could play it, all right? Anyway, this is totally not how we usually run lessons in here. If you're new, this is usually I am on the drum kit and we are playing. That is usually what is happening. But I get a lot I get a lot of questions from people, and a lot of times people don't progress because of this kind of crap, man, and it makes me angry to the point that you've got a person there that's willing to work, and the reason that they're not getting it done is because they have such a horrible attitude. Okay, so we're going to leave for just a few minutes. We're going to go silent, and then we will be back with some reviews. So I know this was a little bit abnormal, but that is what it is. We deal with this stuff, mental attitudes. We deal with organization, and I'm going to talk about it. And that way I can put it in the vault and in the freestyle area, and future students will have the benefit of us sitting here talking about Twinkies, me being a fat kid, and me being real hard on myself. And hopefully they won't be quite as hard on themselves. And next time they go to practice, things will come out better for them. So eat Twinkies, pray for Twinkies, love Twinkies. I think that's a good note to lead this on. We'll be back in just a few minutes.